All right, in this video we are going to look at delivery. Oftentimes when people think of public speaking and those that do it very well, they are thinking about the words that are said, how they're said, in what order, what arrangement, is there a good attention getter at the beginning, was there something closing and memorable in the end, and so on. And while those are vitally important to the success of any kind of speaking, and I don't just mean public speaking, I'm referring to one-on-one speaking as well. Even though those are vital things to speaking in general, another very important, equally vital piece is the delivery in which those words are presented. Very similar to listening, delivery is multifaceted. It's nuanced. There are little bits and pieces that all work together to make a whole picture. Just as a car is built with all these various different pieces of various shapes and various sizes with different functions and purposes. Your delivery has a variety of pieces that can mold into one whole package that you deliver when you're presenting a speech of some sort. Really, if you think about it, there are a lot of different ways in which a delivery can be successful or unsuccessful. And today we're going to look at some of those ways and give you some tips and ideas on how to be as successful as possible. Now, some of you may be well trained in the area of public speaking, and some of you may be completely new to this. It doesn't matter whether you're brand new or whether you're seasoned. There are always things that you can tweak. So don't go too much in depth with delivery at first, especially if you're new to this. Look at some of the key things that you can throw in, that you can use to be successful, and go with that first. And think about some of the problems you may be encountering yourself. Delivery is a big deal. It does make a great deal of difference when you are trying to present information. Really, just think about it. Have you ever been listening to a lecture in a classroom, or maybe your boss is presenting material and the voice is real flat, or they're real quiet, or maybe they have no facial expressions at all, or maybe there's something about their attire that's a little bit off, and you have a hard time focusing on the content? So really, your delivery is the first line of defense. It's the first thing that you do in order to get the content out successfully. And as I mentioned earlier, it is very multifaceted. There are a lot of bits and pieces to this puzzle. So let's take a look at a few of those bits. I like this little comic here. It says, "Don't use that tone with me," because one of the major parts of delivery is your tone. Now, there is something that we call paralanguage in communication. Paralanguage just basically means the vocal things you do rather than the verbal things you do. So basically what you do with your voice. Those things include a variety of pieces, the first three of which are volume, pitch, and rate. And I add these all into one little package because they oftentimes go together. If you think about it, there are times in which you are attempting to emit a certain emotion in your speech. Maybe it's urgency or sadness or frustration or something of that nature. When you are trying to admit that, or you're trying to bring that forward, oftentimes your volume, your pitch, and your rate will kind of coincide to relay that emotion. So for example, if I was trying to explain to you the excitement I felt watching a NASCAR race, for example, if I am explaining that to you in a one-on-one conversation, think about how my pitch will probably change the more excited I get. I will likely get a little bit faster. I might eke up in pitch a little bit because I'm excited, and maybe I will go a little bit louder as well. So all of those three things work together to combine into one emotional relay of information. So when you look at your volume, your pitch, and your rate, as long as you're feeling whatever emotion it is that you're trying to convey, you really should not have to purposefully change anything. But if there is a very vital piece that you really need to make sure that this comes across the way you want, you can look at the emotion you're trying to send and then use your volume, your pitch, and your rate in order to enhance that emotion. The one thing you can do is check to see if any of these three things are problems that you have. Starting with volume. Are you naturally a soft speaker? There are many people, especially those that are highly anxious about public speaking, that tend to be softer speakers. It's a form of hiding a little bit when you're up there speaking. If you don't hear my voice, then I'm not up here speaking. So there is that issue that you may be encountering, or maybe you're the opposite. Maybe you're really loud and it can be another form of defense, or maybe that's just your personality. So understanding whether you fall into one of those two categories with volume is key. And then working on those levels with other folks, other people, having them say, hey, look, at any time that you feel I'm getting too loud, hold your hand up. That will help that person to engage you in assessing what issues you have with volume. And the same applies to pitch and rate. So if you tend to have a high-pitched voice, oftentimes people tend to want to tune you out because it can become obnoxious. If you have a very deep voice, it tends to be a little bit resonant, and it can lull people into a very calm, quiet feeling. And so if you are trying to encourage anger, frustration, and the like, that deep voice isn't going to help. The rate also applies here. And this is probably one of my biggest faults. I tend to be a very fast speaker. The more passionate I am about a topic, the faster I speak. So if that's you, think about what you're doing. Is it too fast? Is it too slow? Do you hesitate a lot? Again, get somebody that you trust, a spouse, a friend, a family member, and just start reading your speech. And if they feel like you're going too fast, have them raise their hand to purposely cause you to slow down. If you acknowledge what they are hearing, you're able to make those adjustments and then practice them. A couple of other tips. If you do know that you tend to have problems in these areas, or if you want to be a little bit more strategic about how you use volume, pitch, and rate in a speech, take your outline or your note cards and make notations within those note cards and within the outline to tell yourself to slow down, or to get quiet in an area, or to speed up because you want to show intensity. Or maybe if you are just universally quiet throughout the note cards or throughout the outline, make a note to yourself, big bold letters, speak up, speak up. What I tell my students to do often, especially those that tend to have a pitch problem, a volume problem where they're real quiet, or a rate problem, I ask them to go through their speech and find 3 or 4 bits of information. It could be facts, it could be a statement, a claim, any bit of information that you think without this sentence or without this bit of information, the speech would be not nearly as successful. That I must have this in there or I will mess this up. This is not going to be as powerful if I were to pull this out. So find 3 or 4 of those things. And then while you are going through your notes, make a note on that section, wherever you're using that sentence or that little bit of information, to use volume, pitch, and rate strategically. So you might underline a place where you want to speed up. Maybe you put an arrow up in order to show that you want to raise your pitch. Maybe you want to increase your volume, so you might write the word loud above it. Just for those 3 or 4 things. That way, if you tend to be kind of a quiet speaker and it's hard to hear you, if you do that strategically for those 3 or 4 things, the most vital things will be at least obviously distinct when you're speaking and won't be missed. And it'll also help you to increase some of those categories, the volume, the pitch, and the rate, increase their effectiveness as you're speaking in other areas, not just the 3 to 4. Trust me, it works. If you try it a few times, just give it a chance and see what you can come up with. Now, volume, pitch, and rate are just one category. That's that emotion that you're trying to relay. Another one, and probably my favorite, is stress. So stress is the emphasis that you put on a word. And it can often change the entire nature of what you're saying. So for example, I've got a couple of sentences here, and I'm going to say them to you. Think about them yourself and how they might change based on the stress that you put on certain words. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to emphasize a word. And I want you to think to yourself, what is it that I'm saying? What is it that she's trying to relay to me? So here's the first one. I didn't say she stole the money. So what am I saying? I am saying that, hey, I didn't say she stole the money. That wasn't me. Somebody else said it. Number two, I didn't say she stole the money. Again, I am saying something a little different here. I'm saying that I didn't actually say it. I kind of implied it, or maybe I wrote it down, something other than actually saying she stole the money. Number three, I didn't say she stole the money. What am I saying? In this one, I'm saying that somebody else stole the money. She didn't do it. Number four, I didn't say she stole the money. What am I saying here? Well, I didn't say that she actually stole it. Maybe she borrowed it. She plans to bring it back, right? Number five, finally, I didn't say she stole the money. And what am I saying there? She stole the whole purse. She stole a checkbook, so it wasn't actually cash. I am saying something different in all five sentences, but all of the sentences are exactly the same. All I've changed is what words I've emphasized, and that changes the entire meaning of the sentence. Really, think about it. The next time your significant other says to you, "It's not what you said, it's how you said it," they may be right. It could be that the tone of your voice really did alter the nature of the content. Really think about, what is sarcasm? Sarcasm is nothing but, well, not always, but in many cases, it is almost always the tone of your voice. If you say something like, "I love this class," that says that I really like you guys, that you're fantastic. But I could also say, "I love this class," and it completely changes the tone, the message that I'm trying to relay. Now this can apply to strategic use of emphasis when you are writing a speech. So for example, if you are doing a speech on autism awareness, and you have a statistic in your speech that says 1 in 88 people will be diagnosed with autism. Imagine the difference in just saying that statistic versus using stress strategically, stress and maybe even pausing strategically in that sentence in order to be as effective as possible with getting the gravity of that statistic out. So let's imagine that you just read it. So how does it sound? 1 in 88 people are diagnosed with autism. Yeah, that's an important statistic. But what if you use stress and pausing to add emphasis to those words, to that number? Here's another version. 1 in 88 people are diagnosed with autism. Boy, how that changes, right? It feels heavier. There's a weight to that statistic when you use that kind of tone, that kind of stress, to add emphasis to a number that is vital. This is why I say go through and find 3 or 4 things that are absolutely vital to your speech, that are really important to getting your message across, and use strategic editing, like with your volume, your pitch, your rate, or emphasizing certain words, to make sure that that comes across the way you want it to come across. That will make a world of difference. Now, another part of paralanguage is the ineffective use of pausing. So now we talked about using pauses effectively. And way back we spoke about using pauses to allow for information to sink in, and then also for anticipation. So you say something, you pause, like you're getting ready to tell a story or getting ready to finish something important, and they are anticipating your statement. Another would be for you to say something important, like 1 in 88 people are diagnosed with autism, and then stop talking so that they can take in the gravity of that number. So when I used pausing earlier with the autism quote, if I were to stop right after people, which is what I originally did, 1 in 88 people, I'm saying 1 in 88 people, pause. I'm allowing anticipation so that you are going, 1 in 88 people do what? What's going on? And then I finish it with what the situation is. Or I don't have to pause there. I could pause at the end of the sentence and allow for you to reflect on the information. 1 in 88 people are diagnosed with autism. Pause. That allows for reflection. So you could do it either way to be strategic. What you don't want to do is use the vocal pauses. All right? These are the, yeah, like, whatever, you know what I mean? That kind of stuff. Have you ever done that? Sometimes our whole conversation is filled with these vocalized pauses. No, I did, yeah, but whatever, never mind. How many times have you heard something like that? When someone's trying to get information out and it's so hesitant and so filled with those vocalized pauses that we struggle to even be coherent. And when you hear that, it's difficult. Now, many of you will find that you use them occasionally, not so frequently that it is a problem, but you use them occasionally, and there's probably the capacity to make some adjustments there, but it's not so horrific that you're struggling to be understood. While others, maybe the ums, uhs, ers, likes, and you knows are so frequent that they take over the speech. So what are you supposed to do? How do you fix this? Well, the general rule of thumb, and there's a lot of tips and tools out there, but the general rule of thumb is just to breathe during pauses, as opposed to speaking during a pause. So you don't vocalize the pause, you just pause. That sounds easy enough, but oftentimes we can't help ourselves. So here's a challenge for you. I would recommend that you go into a 2 to 3 week time span where you are actively trying to shut down those vocalized pauses. When I was in high school, heaven forbid, I was very much like a valley girl, and then we and she and then we did this, you're like, oh my goodness, that kind of stuff. Somebody shoot me. I can't believe I used to talk like that. But I did. I was 15, 16 years old, and I drove my research writing professor, or I guess in this case teacher, bonkers. She hated it. And it wasn't just me. Most of the people, especially females in my class, talked like that. So she got pretty frustrated. Actually, she jumped on the table that she was teaching from and started pointing her finger at us and yelling. It was quite intense, actually. I'm not going to do that, but what I would recommend you do is take a 14 to 21 day challenge. Actually, you don't even have to do that, really. If you're very, very vigilant, you could do this in 3 days, but that's your call. And what I would recommend you do is be conscious of every time you like, whatever. So use your consciousness, your awareness of it to stop yourself. Now, some people recommend putting a rubber band around your wrist, and every time you use one of those words, you snap the rubber band. I'm not quite sure I love that idea, but I know it works for some people, so go give it a try if that's your thing. What I like to do is if I find that I have gotten into a habit of using some of these vocal pauses, like you see here, I use something like this, as Obama's doing here. Every time I notice it, I put my fingers to my lips. Not in a shushing tone. You don't want that. I just touch my lips lightly, kind of like he's doing. And the reason I do that is because it is a physical gesture that interrupts the vocal pause, or at least it stops it after you've done it the first time. And it's also a good thing to do when you're thinking, as opposed to filling in those thoughtful moments with verbal pauses. If you just do a gesture like he's doing, fingers to the lips, it allows you to think and stops you from vocalizing your pauses. So I do that. When I had that trouble, I would use these this two-finger technique to make sure that I stopped myself. I only did it for probably 3 or 4 days, I think. It may not have even been that long, and I was in high school. 3 or 4 days, I'd touch my fingers to my lips, and I was able to stop saying like in that way super fast. So it's something that if you find you tend to have an issue with it, that you could give it a go and see what happens. These are parts of paralanguage. Now there are other things I'm going to throw up here real quick. For example, pronunciation. So making sure that when a word is relayed, that it's pronounced correctly. Now I do have a sort of leeway with this. In most cases, you need to figure out the pronunciation. You need to go in, you need to know exactly how to pronounce that medical term or that ingredient in your dish or in medicine that you're going to discuss. So you do need to know how to pronounce those things. However, occasionally you will have a word or a person's name that the pronunciation isn't obvious, and it's very hard to even find out how to appropriately pronounce that person's name. And it's not a high-stakes situation. You're not doing a promotion or something, or you're not trying to get a client. It would be a situation like our course. If you find yourself in that case and you're trying to cite a person who wrote an article and you have no way of finding out easily what their name sounds like, I ask that you either find out, so contact that person and ask for the phonetic spelling if you want to go that far, or just get it wrong. So basically, get it right or get it wrong. Don't mess with it. Don't fuddle with it when you get up to the podium to speak. So for example, if you were quoting me, I would rather you say, according to Professor Ruppert-Leach, or according to Professor Ruppert-Leach. I don't care which one it is, as long as it sounds confident, as long as it sounds like you've got this. What I don't want to hear is, according to Professor Rupert, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Ruppert-Leach, I guess, and then go on. What does that do to your credibility? Boy, it just tanks it. So don't do that. Don't fuss with it when you get up there. Get it right or get it wrong. That's it. So pronunciation is a thing to consider. Another thing is your articulation. Now this is going to sound cheesy, but if you could just do it with me, you're probably at home sitting by yourself, so it shouldn't be embarrassing in any way. But I want you to say out loud the words lips, teeth, and tongue. Lips, teeth, and tongue. What does that do when you say those words? Well, it makes you hyper aware of your lips, teeth, and tongue. And what do you use to articulate words? Your lips, teeth, and tongue. So when you're getting ready to speak professionally, like in a classroom setting or a business setting, right before you go in to speak, say lips, teeth, and tongue. And you can do it in a bathroom stall, you can do it in the corner of a room, you can do it under your breath. You don't have to do it in front of people, but say those words. It brings full awareness to the front of your mind of your lips, your teeth, and your tongue, so that you can articulate the information very clearly. I would also recommend being very well hydrated, because when your mouth goes a little bit dry, you tend to spit a bit. I know that sounds weird because your mouth is dry, but the process is strange, and you tend to spit a little when you are not hydrated. So once you get that articulation down, make sure you keep yourself hydrated. So pronunciation is a part of delivery, articulation is a part of delivery, and then finally, dialect can be impactful in delivery. Now, there's not a lot we can do about it in a fundamental of public speaking class. However, I want you to be aware of the nuances, of the stereotypes that tend to occur with dialect. Oftentimes when we hear certain tones, so a heavy southern drawl, we tend to have this stereotypical perception of the abilities of the person speaking. Unfortunately, for the heavy southern drawl, it's negative. People see that as unintelligent. Think to yourself though, is it unintelligent? Absolutely not. There are many people with a heavy southern drawl that are absolutely brilliant. They are some of my favorite podcasts are some of the most brilliant people I've listened to come from the South and have those heavy southern accents. But unfortunately, media has decided that those are going to be the people that are not intelligent. So it's something to consider when you're listening to a speaker, or if you yourself have an accent. What is the perception of that accent? Another one would be the English accent. What do people think of the English accent? Fancy, posh, preppy, smart? If that's the case, if that's what you automatically associate with that accent, you're going to be diligent, right? You're going to be diligent about listening to every word that person says so that you don't allow your own biases to take over and make that information hard to digest appropriately within reality. You want to make sure that what you're hearing, is accurate and not just based on somebody's tone of voice and their dialect. And then the last little kind of funny note here is just understanding words in general. For example, in a lot of areas, and this may not be the most accurate map here, but in a lot of areas we use different words for different things. For example, the word in Illinois for a fizzy drink is soda. But in other areas, it's pop or Coke. So for example, if you go to Georgia and you ask for a Coke, they may say, what kind? And if you were from Illinois, you're going to say a Coke, Coca-Cola, right? Because we call it soda in Illinois, but in other areas it's called something else. So you're going to have to consider those things. I mean, even somebody with an English or Australian accent uses words that are different than what we are used to. I had a friend from Australia who used a couple of words that I found hilarious. For example, we went to Walmart one day and we both got out of the car. This was the first time I'd really hung out with her for more than 5 or 6 minutes. We both got out of the car and she said, would you go get me a trolley? And I thought, we're at Walmart. We don't get trolleys at Walmart. We get carts at Walmart. It just seemed so wrong to be called a trolley at Walmart. So there are things like that that can adjust your perception, but that's just a funny little note. So this is paralanguage. Again, it goes all the way back to what we talked about earlier with stress and volume, rate and pitch, as well as pausing, articulation, pronunciation, and then the impact that dialect can have. Now finally, the other part of communication in terms of delivery is your body. So if you see this picture here, these two pictures, if they were both giving the same speech, I'm here to persuade you to vote, and you have somebody wearing sweats and a hooded sweatshirt and some gross tennis shoes, and they are trying to persuade you to vote, how different would you feel if you were listening to somebody that's dressed a little bit more professionally here with the same topic? I mean, this is not a topic about being comfy. The topic is about persuading you to vote and takes a lot of effective argumentation and a lot of research as well. So your first impression, the physical attire that you are wearing, your personal appearance, that can make a great deal of difference in how you're perceived. Imagine what you think when you decide how to dress for an interview. Why do you choose to wear the things that you wear? What's the point? When you go out on a date, why do you choose the outfit that you choose? When you wear certain colors, maybe you really are a fan of black or grays or what have you, why do you like those colors? I tend to navigate to the darker colors, darker or maybe some kind of silvery pop of color. I don't usually do bright colors, reds or pinks or oranges or anything like that. I'm very much a dark colored person. And I tend to use those colors because my personality is a little bit quirky in that way. And I like to illustrate my personality with my attire. Is that you? I have a friend who is a very bubbly person, and boy, she would never be caught dead wearing all black or black and gray or what have you. There's got to be something yellow or something pink in the attire somewhere. So think about that. What's the point of your attire? What does it say? How does it relay information when you're speaking? So attire is something, the way you dress is something. For speeches in the public speaking class, I expect students to dress with business attire or better. That means no jeans, no jeans and no sweats. Khaki pants, dress pants, skirts, dresses, that kind of thing. Suits are fine. That's a little bit more advanced, but it's up to you if you want to go that route. But definitely something more like this rather than like this. Another thing is movement. If you get into an advanced public speaking class, there's actually a movement that you can do that is strategic to use when you're giving a speech with various points. In our experiences, I just ask that you don't restrict your movement. And this applies to both movement and gestures. When I say don't restrict, I mean don't grip the lectern for dear life. That holds your hands back. It restricts your gestures. I also mean don't lock your knees because you'll faint, and I really can't have that in class. So please move a little bit. I would recommend, especially if you still want to make use of the lectern. I loathe the lectern. I never use it. I hate it because I feel claustrophobic behind it. But many people love it. So I recommend that you put your notes on the lectern and you take one kind of decent step backwards. So make sure your notes are big enough that you can still see them. And what that does is that gives you a little bit of room to move, and it definitely gives you room to use gestures. Now, depending upon your personality, your gestures are going to vary. If you are like me, you gesture big. You use lots of gestures, and they are very frequent and they're very large. If you are more of a quiet personality, then your gestures might be closer to your body or very small. But everybody gestures. There is not a single person that doesn't gesture at all. Even if the gestures are low to your side and just your hands, people still gesture when they talk naturally. It's just when we speak publicly, we tend to freeze, we get nervous, and those gestures are restricted. Another way that people restrict gestures is by putting hands in pockets or crossing your arms in a defensive gesture. That's the kind of thing I would recommend you avoid. Couple other options real quick is that if you are a person that tends to put your hands in your pockets or to grab your hands and wring your fingers, bring up a pen that, not a clickable pen, you don't want anything that makes this sound. You don't want that, but some kind of pen that doesn't make that clicking noise, bring it up with you. That will allow you to have something to hold on to and to grip for that desire to wring your fingers, but will keep you from actually holding your hands together, which shows discomfort, and you don't want to relay discomfort because it'll add to your own discomfort as well. So bring up a pen, just be careful. Sometimes people drop it. If you drop it, it's not a big deal. Just be careful with what you've got up there. So personal appearance, movement, gestures, and then finally, last but not least, is eye contact. Now, eye contact is a big deal here too. When you consider how you can relay credibility, personal appearance is definitely one of them. Dressing the part is definitely one of them. Another is eye contact. Depending upon the culture you're in, the ability to communicate with eye contact can really change how a person or a group of people perceive you. For example, if I am in the American culture and I avoid eye contact, I look down or I look to the side or I look above their heads, it comes off like you are uncomfortable. Maybe you are disingenuous. You are hiding something. So you want to make sure that there is at least brief eye contact, and in an audience that you make eye contact with each section of the room. What I would recommend you do is divide the room into thirds and purposely look at each third at least 3 times throughout the speech. And you don't have to be strategic. All right, I've looked at this one for 30 seconds, now we're moving to the middle and so on. No, just scan the audience a little bit. Make sure that there's frequency in those thirds, okay? So eye contact is key. Now remember, not every culture thinks this way with eye contact. In many cultures, direct eye contact is a challenge. It's disingenuous. It's the opposite of what it is in the North American culture. So consider where you are before doing any specific moves with gestures, eye contact, and so on. The American culture, especially the Midwest, eye contact is great. Gestures are great. And you know which ones are appropriate and which ones aren't. Okay? So these are the things that you can consider when thinking of body communication. Now, finally, I want to play this clip for you. This is the last thing that we'll do on this delivery video. And this is how to deliver a speech like Obama. Now, regardless of your opinions of him politically, that's irrelevant. You have to admit he's good. He is good with his delivery. Now, there are some cases where he uses a lot of filler words or has some hesitations that show he's maybe not quite comfortable with the information. But if you go back to some of his prepared speeches, oh, he's good. He knows what he's doing. So we're actually going to watch a video here that I have up on the screen. And this is a training video for being an effective speaker, very similar in terms of delivery that Obama would be. And I really like this video, so we're going to watch this one real quick.
Okay. Do you remember the feeling of playing sport at school, standing in line, waiting to be picked, thinking, pick me, pick me? Then finally you were picked, and after a brief sigh of relief, you realised you'd been chosen by the team that you really didn't want to be on. The players didn't include you. They never gave you the ball, but at least it was better than not being picked. Reality shows that... I'm getting dizzy from watching my head move in circles. Vote for me. Don't pick me. Remember that you don't need to wait for someone else to pick you in order to live that life that you want. You can pick yourself instead.
You do a little lick off like, oh, can I give up that? So, like I say, for a first take, there's reasonable flow there, but there's nothing to tell us how to feel, and that's your job. As a presenter, as a communicator, you've got to tell us how to feel. If you're not going to, then you can just text, and we will get a better version of it in our heads. Right. So I'd like to give you some coaching to make it better. So if you can just lift from here a little bit more, there we go, settle them together, and just slightly higher. It's going to feel weird, but it looks really good on TV. I want you to gesture broadly outwards. So Mr. Greedy is the best book for waking up your voice and waking up your gestures. Okay. Mr. Greedy liked to eat. Gesture. In fact, Mr. Greedy loved to eat. Bigger. And the more he ate, the fatter he became. Bigger. And the trouble was, the fatter he became, the more hungry he became. Bring out Churchill. Oh, good. When you get to the end of each sentence, you then stop. You can't say anything at all until I tap you on the shoulder. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight them on the landing grounds. So we're going to do one more. This one's Obama, and this is more of a positive note. So take one word and look to the back of the room as you deliver it. We have picked ourselves up. Elbows away. We have fought our way back. And we know in our hearts that for the United States of America, go big, the best is yet to come. Yeah. Good. How did you feel with that one? I'm quite overcome with emotion. Yeah, you should be too. Do you remember the feeling of playing sport at school? Standing in line, waiting to be picked. Thinking, pick me, pick me. Then finally you were picked, and after a brief sigh of relief, you realised that you had been chosen by the team that you really didn't want to be on. The players didn't include you. They didn't pass you the ball. But at least it was better than not being picked. Reality shows are pushing the pick-me culture. Vote for me. Don't evict me. Expose everything about me. Businesses are the same. Interview me. Hire me. Promote me. Whatever happens, pick me. Then, following the sigh of relief you get from being hired, you realise you don't want to be on that company's team at all. According to a study by Deloitte, 80% of people hate the jobs that they're in. Imagine this. What if you could live a life that you love? What if you could give more, earn more, and live more than you ever thought was possible? So instead of waiting for somebody to pick you, why don't you pick yourself? I'm not suggesting that running your own business is easy. It's not. It's really hard. But it's not complex. It's simple. Everyone can do it. Just find something that you love doing, that people want to pay you for doing, and start doing it. Whatever you choose, remember, you don't have to wait for somebody to pick you. To live the life that you want, just pick yourself.
All right. So as you see, he was obviously not a professional speaker or anything truly extraordinary, but the difference of before coaching and after coaching was quite significant. I don't know about you, but I didn't even know what he was talking about in the before coaching. I was kind of zoning out within that few seconds. It was really hard to focus on. But once you get into those tools, those big gestures, the facial expression, the pausing, the tone, the emphasis, all of that can culminate together to create a picture. Well, it could be perfect, it could be medium, mediocre, whatever, but it creates a picture and allows your audience to maintain focus on the information. And it allows you to be more effective. So hopefully some of these tips and tools were good for you. And if you have any questions, you know where to find me. Thanks, guys.